Thank you all for coming this morning. It's great to see such a good turnout, and hopefully we're going to have a good discussion on this panel, which is about the next Silicon Valley. So I'm going to briefly introduce my panelists, but then let each of them explain a little bit about where they work and why they think they have a good perspective on this topic. So we have David Lee from Refactor, Cheryl Cheng from BlueRun Ventures, and also Adam Draper from Boost VC. So David, why don't you go first?
Sure. So my name's David Lee. I'm the chairman of Refactor Capital. It's a seed firm that we started about 3 years ago with my partner Zal Billamoria, really focused on what we call fundamental human problems, or problems that founders didn't really address up until the last 3 or 4 years, problems that we call sort of hard but not impossible. We're based in Burlingame. I'm based in LA, and I do some angel investing as well in Los Angeles.
Great, thanks. Cheryl?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cheryl, and I'm at BlueRun Ventures. So I invest out of our U.S. fund. Our strategy is to invest in early stage companies that are U.S. go-to-market. Our footprint, however, as a firm consists of multiple vehicles. So we've invested globally from the US, Israel, Europe, China, Korea, Japan, India in the past. Today, our funds are focused on US, China, and Korea in different stages for the different opportunities that seem to be most apt for those geographies.
Perfect. Adam?
Hi, I'm Adam Draper, founder of Boost VC. Thank you for hosting and coming to this event. I'm sure everyone came from different locations, and the train broke down for my train, so I am empathizing with anyone who had a similar experience. What Boost VC is we're a pre-seed fund for sci-fi technology. Basically, I have this thesis that there's trillions of dollars locked up in borders. We are humans on a rock hurtling through space, and for some reason we have borders. And so this is a very relevant panel for me because the globalization of technology and smart people is very apt.
Great. Okay, so each of you, quick, name your favorite unicorn from outside Silicon Valley. David.
I don't know if it's a unicorn yet, but Binance.
Okay, tell us about that.
It's a crypto company. It's sort of distributed throughout Asia and other parts of the world. And I really like it because I think it sort of represents the current culture in crypto right now in terms of decentralized and distributed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cheryl?
Mine is ByteDance.
It is. Okay, great.
So I'm going to be on the team of whales, not unicorns.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone's relevant, but Fred Wilson wrote a great post about whales, not unicorns. I'm on the whale team. I'm not a huge fan of the term unicorn. They're mythical beasts. And the whale that I like the most that's sort of international is Grab, because when I was in Singapore, I wouldn't have been able to have my trip logistically without Grab. It was just a good service, picking me up, dropping me off.
Okay, awesome. So I noticed 2 out of 3 of these came not only from outside Silicon Valley, but outside the U.S. Where is yours based?
They're based in Malta.
Oh, in Malta. Okay, so all 3 are not only outside Silicon Valley, but outside the U.S.
Binance is the coolest story, though. So I'm not okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that was the question, right? Outside of Silicon Valley?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, like, you didn't pick Kansas City or Chattanooga, and we talked about this a little bit
okay.
on, how there's always this hope, like every year, that somehow the rest of the U.S. is going to step up and become the next Silicon Valley. But year after year, the same percentage of money goes to Silicon Valley. So even though the overall pool is growing larger, there's no place that's showing signs of really challenging Silicon Valley's ascendance in any way in the U.S. But if you go overseas, I wrote a story about how over the last 3 years, Beijing has raised almost as much money for startups as startups here in San Francisco, and that's not even counting San Jose. It's San Mateo County and San Francisco. So San Francisco companies have raised about $80 billion over the last 3 years, and Beijing-based startups have raised $72 billion. So you see where that's going. You know, any year now, Beijing is going to eclipse the Bay Area, but not the rest of the U.S. So why do we keep hearing this about the companies, areas in the U.S. that could like rise up and take on Silicon Valley? And what is the flaw with that theory? Would one of you like to jump in?
I think it's a framing thing. Like, I think if you think of it in terms of tech hubs,
Right.
and tech innovation, I don't think any place is going to really compare with Silicon Valley. And when I think of tech innovation, I'm a little old school in terms of how I think of this, or I think of it very narrowly in terms of like a tech breakthrough, zero marginal costs, software breakthroughs, engineers are sort of the stars of the company. And that's a very narrow sliver of a type of company. But that doesn't mean that huge value can't be created in other parts of the country. So,
But also huge value created in other parts of the country doesn't necessarily make them a Silicon Valley.
yeah,
So-
which is fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you think of LA, for example, what's happening there in terms of media, fashion, art, I think that's just as exciting as what's happening here, but it's very different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, do you think there are certain companies, types of companies that benefit from being outside Silicon Valley?
I think there are. If you take, David's more narrow view of like what is a tech company, then definitely I think it's more challenging to look for tech hubs outside. And it's just more of a concentration of technical talent more than anything else. But in other parts of the country, one of the interesting things is they have a different consumer insight. So we have a company in our portfolio called Cabbage, which started in 2009, and it came out of the financial crisis because small business owners couldn't get access to working capital loans from banks when the banks pulled back. Silicon Valley bounced back from the financial crisis very quickly. So the insight wasn't there as much here locally as it was in other parts of the country that continued to suffer during the financial crisis. So I think there are places in the country and there are entrepreneurs who can see opportunity that we don't necessarily see here, just because our demographics are different, our users are different, our access to technology, our income level is different here. So I think that there is opportunity, but I don't know that all those companies would necessarily fit like David's definition of a tech company.
Right. So think broader than tech.
Yeah.
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 There's this founder, his name's Richard Browning, and we backed him. He makes jetpacks. It's cool. You should check it out. It's called Gravity.
Wait,
Like
Adam, have you tried on one of these jetpacks?
No is my quick answer, and I've backed two of them, and they both fly, and it's my fault. It's not theirs that I haven't done it. So
Wait, you have jetpacks flying around and you haven't strapped them on?
well, the one's in the UK. And
Oh, okay.
one's in LA. That I have no argument. I should be flying that one. And my goal is to be the first venture capitalist to commute to work in a jetpack.
That would have solved your problems this morning.
Yeah, right? And it all comes back to Caltrain.
So where are they based?
Okay, they're based in the UK, but he said it makes sense that Silicon Valley, it's the deepest roots of rebels. So basically, like these rebels who left Britain and fought the England, then some subset of them trekked all the way across the country, and the ones who survived. Or like the risk tolerant of the risk tolerant. And I thought that was like the best way of putting it, where like they established these roots in Silicon Valley that developed this risk tolerance for just solving problems. And so I think it's really about setting up risk tolerant roots. And so I think that smart people, that has been proven to be everywhere. Like I don't think that there's like more or less than anywhere. But there's better governance structures to allow entrepreneurs to run free in certain countries. And then on top of that, we have just been doing it the longest in this area. So if I am a startup or a founder outside of Silicon Valley, I generally suggest one of the things, I provide housing and office space for our founders. And like coming to Silicon Valley, I back 40% of our portfolio is outside of the country. So I'm not Silicon Valley maximalist. That's sort of a crypto thing, I guess, maximalism. But having a network here, it creates, it's all about creating competitive advantage. And like, it creates competitive advantage to have access to capital, to have access to a network that has access to capital, to surround yourself with people who've done this before. And like, that's sort of why I would say that's why. Now, where the next one happens,
Did you say you provide housing for your startups? Mm-hmm. And is that because people literally can't afford to live here if you don't do that? And how long
It's a
does that
benefit.
last?
It's a side benefit. Like, otherwise, it's super expensive here.
Right.
It's like really, really difficult. So we have 20 rooms in San Mateo where we put up
so it's like a dorm situation.
Yeah, and so when people a lot of our companies, obviously, I back 300 companies and 40% of them for different countries. And when they come in, fly in, they can just have like a hotel, essentially, where they can stay for an extended period of time if they give us a heads up.
Are there others doing that, or?
Not really.
Okay.
Upwest Labs does that a little bit because they bring entrepreneurs from Israel. So we do a lot of co-investing with them, and one of the things in their program is that they will house their founders, but they're more of an accelerator. So I don't know. Do you offer it indefinitely?
No. Okay. So we are a program. We have a program, but all of our founders that we invest in from the fund have access. So it's one of these.
Okay.
It's more of a
Got it.
And to be clear, I don't think it's an either or thing. So it's not like you take LA, for example.
Right.
And what's happening there, I think, is very different from what's happening here. And so, but to frame it as a tech hub or what's the next tech hub, I think does disservice to what's happening there and also potentially to what's happening here.
Right.
I think the reality is every major city will have tech activity.
Sure.
No matter what. I mean, I think we all understand that software is going to be pervasive and big companies, Fortune 500 companies, everybody is going to need to do it. It's more of a question of that entrepreneurial spirit. If there's a critical mass of founders that, to Adam's point, like there's a culture there that founders can rally around.
Right. So one thing that's happened in tech and startups since I moved to Silicon Valley about 8 years ago, back then, Silicon Valley startups were heroes and everybody wanted to come here. Now, people here are the enemies who destroyed democracy, and I'm wondering how that affects startups. Like, do you see startups outside Silicon Valley saying, thank God we're not tainted, we'd never move to Silicon Valley? Does it help them raise more money, or does that not come into it at all? Like, are people kind of seizing on that as a fundraising pitch, or?
I mean, in my experience, I haven't really experienced that
Okay.
in terms of founders who are avoiding Silicon Valley for that particular reason. I think what you see is just an awareness that you can start a company, regardless of the type of company, anywhere in the world.
Right.
That sounds like a cliche, but you will see a lot of the companies, once they hit a certain point or escape velocity, they will start looking here in terms of funding and also maybe having an office here.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've seen that too. So I think one of the things with tech ecosystems is it's not just where you have entrepreneurs, but you also have funding, and there's the highest concentration of venture capital money, well, maybe outside of Beijing in the future, here in Silicon Valley. So most companies, to David's point, once they get to a certain point, they do come here for fundraising. And we've seen, there's also a lot of benefit to being close to your technology partners, the Googles, Facebooks,
Right.
Apples, Oracles of the world. And so a lot of them, even if they have an office outside of Silicon Valley, will set up some kind of business presence here, or look for investors that are here as kind of an extension of their business, like boots on the ground in Silicon Valley that can help them. So I don't think that there's avoiding it, but founders have to grow their companies where they can get access to talent and good talent. And if their roots are outside the valley, then they may think to start their companies there.
Right.
I think it does get back to just risk tolerance, roots, And so LA is a perfect example because they're starting to really just boom down in Los Angeles because of Snapchat, there's just a lot of really smart people down in LA. But I would say that was result of, in the 90s, there were a bunch of startups that succeeded and failed in Los Angeles. There was like GoTo, there were Idea Lab, there was all these different groups who actually did pretty well, and then the DNA of that started a smaller, like, believers of risk tolerance, uproot the corporations and media companies. And so then you start to create, things like Snapchat, things that actually change the world. I think that that's just something that is slowly going to be everywhere. And technology has flattened the ability for anyone to be able to build anything. I mean, it's pretty crazy. Like 14-year-olds are better with computers than I am, and they're gonna build the next. Now having like 1 million users isn't like a big deal on like a mobile phone because there's so many mobile phones. But I remember when LinkedIn, like, it took them like 1.5 years to get 1 million users, and like no one thinks about that now. So I think I don't know. Like I think we're gonna just see. It actually, what might end up happening is a result of like smaller ecosystems that contribute to their cultures better. And I think that's a little bit of what you're seeing, where it used to be that you copy paste what Silicon Valley or the U.S. did and bring it to a country, China or Africa or wherever. Internet. They did this really well. But now things like DJI exist. Like DJI, the drone company, like, we're copying it over here in Silicon Valley and doing a really poor job. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There are actually some fantastic drone companies. That was actually not a nice comment. But in general, like DJI, like we copied that drone, and that had never really happened before with technology. And so I think we're going to have more and more instances where different countries create something that end up getting copied by Silicon Valley, and that's, markets.
So you all have a poll available that you should bring up on your phone and take a look at. And the question is, which of these cities will be the next tech hub? And they're all not very obvious. Think of them as the Salt Lake cities of their countries. And just vote for one of them. And in a few minutes, I'll see which you thought was the most likely hub.
Australia. Just do it.
And Sarah, there's a caveat.
I love Australia.
Well, I'll tell you what they are. They're Ho Chi Minh City. One is Sydney, one is Sao Paulo, and one is Cape Town. So anyway.
So I wanted to put a caveat to what I said earlier in terms of, when I think of a tech company, I think of a company that's just going to have to like add engineers at scale, like 10, 20 engineers at a time. And for that type of company, it's really hard to build that. I mean, for now, I think Silicon Valley is the best place to be. But as you see these companies that are different types of companies and they're not those companies, you could imagine a world where they stay where they are and they don't have to come to Silicon Valley.
How will crypto companies, how will they change the startup landscape?
Yeah, I think that's a great example of just this idea of a distributed workforce. And I think it's this huge experiment. There are a lot of people who believe that it's better to be face-to-face, and there are a lot of people who believe that you should just go where the talent is. And so I think that is, you think of the founding fathers, if you will, of crypto. It's Satoshi, and we don't know who they are, and Vitalik, and he lives in a suitcase. And that, I'm Vitalik for now. And that, I think, that influences, I think, the dynamics of the whole industry. So what's happening in Asia, for example, I think is just as exciting, if not more exciting, than what's happening here in crypto.
You mean in crypto?
Yeah.
Okay. And why is that?
I think a lot of it has to do with the regulatory environment. It sort of reminds me of, you just see the founders there where they're not as concerned about, I think in the US, naturally, there's this huge overhang of the regulatory system and what you can build there. And I think in Asia, and probably other parts of the world, they don't quite feel that existential threat, even though it's there. It's this really odd dynamic, but you see there's a different energy there than maybe with some of the crypto companies here.
Is there any other area where regulatory environments will help foster a certain industry in a place outside Silicon
I think the story of the next 15 years is basically big tech versus big government. So I think that we're seeing that with Libra for cryptocurrency. We're seeing it with the Senate pulling Google in, Facebook in. They're just going to keep pulling people in to show that they have some power, and it's going to be really interesting.
I think all of AI is actually going to be something that is drawn on government policy.
Right.
You know, there's going to be a battle. I mean, we're already seeing that, you know, between the U.S. and China. I think that a lot of it is going to be about who can control the best talent or grow the best talent when it comes to AI. And there's going to be a lot of public policy, both in our country and also international policy around that. And I think that that is going to be another frontier, like, you know, just like we saw it with space, we saw it in, like, you know, telecommunications. We'll see that with AI as well. One thing actually you were talking about, like in terms of concentration of engineers, I actually think that there is really good concentration of engineers outside Silicon Valley. I don't think we can dismiss it. Like, I think that there are a lot of countries and a lot of markets that are investing a lot in math and science. And our country actually has to make sure that we keep up. That's going to be really important. In Silicon Valley, you kind of have this microcosm that's the best of the best. And, you know, we've done some of the best research, but when you talk about building some types of companies, you can throw engineers at it like enterprise software. You know, it isn't necessarily rocket science, and you can find really good pockets of developers and engineers all over the country and all over the world. And there is this balance I think Silicon Valley needs to be careful of. The cost of living is so high, salaries are so high that if it is just about throwing people and engineers towards a problem, can you afford to do that? Is it a good use of venture dollars? If I can only afford 5 engineers in Silicon Valley, I can afford 50 someplace else. Are those 50 really only 1/10 as good as my 5 here in Silicon Valley? I think that's something that we as investors have to weigh and think about, and founders have to think about that as well, because everybody's getting good at computer science. Like 14-year-old can.
Right. The number of computer science degrees is increasing at a faster pace than degrees awarded overall in this country. So there's a glimmer.
And in other countries.
Yeah, and in other countries. So great point. And then Adam, getting back to something you said, so tech versus government, who do you see winning there? Or will they both beat each other up to a bloody pulp? Or what's going to happen?
Well, I think it's just a fascinating conversation because it's almost like these companies have become so powerful that you know, Facebook has 2 billion users. That's a bigger country than any one on the planet. And so suddenly, if you have some control over 2 billion users, you're the biggest country on the planet. And so they don't obviously want this big country to have its own financial system.
Right.
Because that would be taking this financial system out of their own financial system. I think it's always about like managing technology and technology like breaking boundaries. And the government only cares if it gets to a certain power level. And right now we're at like maximum power level of technology companies. I think crypto is going to play a huge role in this world. And I think Facebook just picked it early. And I think everyone's going to be playing there because it's one of the things that dissolves borders. The same way the internet did. That's what is happening with money right now. And so my answer is the question that was asked when the internet was born is, what's a media company? The question that was asked when crypto was born was, what is money? And now what's going to be asked is, what is government? And so it's going to be about what services can actually be provided.
Great question for another panel, probably. Okay, I'd like to see the answers to that poll. Actually, I'm not sure where they come up. Nick, are they coming up on the screen over there? Or Nicole, can you tell me where I can see the answers to the
How do I vote?
I think, do you have your smartphone? You can vote. Paulo.
Right now, it's Sao Paulo.
Oh, okay, great. Here we go. So number 1, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Number 2, Ho Chi Minh City. Sydney, only number 3, 21%, and Cape Town, 20%. That's actually pretty
Pretty
interesting.
even. You guys,
Yeah.
no one wanted to just go all in. Sorry.
Right. All right. On that note, thank you to my panelists. Thank you all again for coming out this morning.